Often when there is dissent expressed in the United States against policies of the Israeli government, people here are called anti-Semitic. What is your response to that as an Israeli Jew?
Well, it's a trick. We always use it. When from Europe somebody is criticizing Israel, then we bring up the Holocaust. When in this country people are criticizing Israel, then there are anti-Semitic. And the organization is strong and has a lot of money, and the ties between Israel and the American Jewish establishment are very strong, and they are strong in this country. As you know, they have power, which it's okay. They are talented people, and they have power, money, and media, and other things. And their attitude is Israel, my country, right or wrong, the identification. And they are not ready to hear criticism. And it's very easy to blame people who criticize certain acts of the Israeli government as anti-Semitics, and to bring up the Holocaust and the suffering of the Jewish people, and that justify everything we do to the Palestinians.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to hear a very frightening speech. This speech is an explanation of the plans now being laid to throw the United States into a third world war. It was made a short time ago before a large group in the congressional room of the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. Both the speech and the question and answer period later so electrified the audience that a group of patriots has transferred it to 2 long-playing records which you may buy to play for friends, clubs, and your church groups in your community. The speaker is Mr. Benjamin Freedman, noted authority on Zionism and all of its schemes. Mr. Freedman is a former Jew, and I mean a former Jew. He has fought the communist world conspiracy tooth and nail and stands today as a leading American patriot. We now take you to the speaker's platform to present Benjamin Freedman.
What I intend to tell you tonight is something that you have never been able to learn from any other source. And what I tell you now concerns not only you, but your children and the survival of this country and Christianity. I'm not here just to dish up a few facts to send up your blood pressure, but I'm here to tell you things that will help you preserve what you consider the most sacred thing in the world, the liberty and the freedom and the right to live as Christians, where you have a little dignity and a little right to pursue the things that your conscience tells you are the right thing as Christians. Now, the Germans felt, well, that was quite a sellout. It was a sellout that I can best compare. Suppose the United States was at war today with the Soviet Union, and we were winning, and we told the Soviet Union, well, let's quit. We offer you peace terms. Let's forget the whole thing. And all of a sudden, Red China came into the war as an ally of the Soviet Union, and throwing them into the war brought about our defeat, a crushing defeat, with a reparations the likes of which man's imagination cannot encompass. Imagine, then, after that defeat, if we found out that it was the Chinese in this country, our Chinese citizens, who all the time we thought they were loyal citizens working with us, was selling us out to the Soviet Union, and it was through them that Red China was brought into the war against us. how would we feel in the United States against Chinese? I don't think one of them would dare show his face on any street. There wouldn't be lampposts enough convenient to take care of them. Imagine how we would feel. Well, that's how the Germans felt towards these Jews. We've been so nice to them, and from 1905 on, when the first communist revolution in Russia failed and the Jews had to scramble out of Russia, they all went to Germany, and Germany gave them refuge, and they were treated very nicely. And here, they sold Germany down the river for no reason at all, other than they wanted Palestine as a so-called Jewish commonwealth. Now they say in Germany, look at what happened to Germany for touching the Jews. What would you, as a citizen of the United States, do to people that did to you what the so-called Jews, the Polacks and Litvaks and Galicianers, they weren't Jews, as I just explained to you. They were Eastern Europeans who'd been converted to Talmudism. There was no such thing as Judaism. Judaism was a name given in recent years to this religion known in Bible history as Torah Piava. No Jew or no educated person ever heard of Judaism. It didn't exist. They pulled it out of the air, a meaningless word, just like anti-Semitic. The Arabs are the Semites, and the Christians go around talking about people who don't like Jews as anti-Semites, and they call all the Arabs anti-Semites, the only Semites in the world of the Arabs. There isn't one Jew who's a Semite. They're all Turco-Fin Mongoloids, the Eastern European Jews. So they brainwash the public, and if you will invite me to meet this reverend who told you these things, I'll convince him, and it'll be one step in the right direction, and I'll go wherever I have to go to meet him.
I insist, not all Jews are Zionists, not all Zionists are Jews. Let me give you a few examples of some, for example, Jews who are not Zionists. The Orthodox Jews against Zionism, called the Neturei Karta, in New York, in London, and in Jerusalem. Norman Finkelstein, who wrote a wonderful book, very interesting book, called The Holocaust Industry, Reflections over the Exploitation of Jewish Suffering. Journalist Israel Shamir, writing out of Israel. Yaakov Yabron, True Torah Jews of Brooklyn, Rabbi Joel Teitelbaum, the Satmar movement. Let me now give you some examples of Gentiles who are not Jewish but are Zionists. Vice President Joe Biden of the United States, who said on 7th April 2007 in Shalom TV, I'm a Zionist. You don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. He's right. The Bushes, the Clintons, Condoleezza Rice, Susan Rice, the Kirchners in my country, both former President Nestor Kirchner and present President Christina Kirchner, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Dick Cheney, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, Senator Alfonso D'Amato, former Mayor of New York City Rudolph Giuliani, Silvio Berlusconi from Italy. In my country, most of the liberal press and its journalists. Let's now look at anti-Semitism. You know, Semitism, or Semitic, is really a linguistic term. It was coined later to describe the Jews in the 19th century by, amongst others, French Count Gobineau, who also said that Semites were to be the counterpart of Aryans. Now, are we doing the right thing if we're talking about Aryans and Semites? Do we want to talk about Aryans and Semites in the 21st century? Anti-Semitism is used nowadays as is really opposition to Semites. The word says it, anti-Semitism. Now, the Semites are the sons of Shem, Noah's elder son in the Bible. Semites are, for example, Sephardic Jews, yes, the Arabs, including the Iraqis, the Lebanese, the Palestinians, the Syrians. But then you have the Ashkenazim Jews. Now that's another story. The Ashkenazim Jews are all of Caucasian, I would even say Aryan, stock. They descend from the Khazars, a Central Asian nomadic tribal empire that converted en masse in the year 740 AD to Judaism. Why did they do that? Because they were a nomadic empire, they were a tribal, and they were scared of being either forced into becoming Muslims by the Baghdad Caliphate or forced to becoming Christians by the power emanating from Constantinople. So what did they do? They converted en masse, all of them at the same time, to Judaism. With the centuries, the Khazars spread to Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, Romania, Germany. Ashkenazim Jews, and this is described by very good academics, Arthur Koestler in the 13th Tribe, Douglas Dunlop, and Israeli investigator Shlomo Zand, who published in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz on the 28th of February of 2008 an article called, and this I'm quoting, "An Invention Called the Jewish People." There, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz says the following, and I'm quoting, "The first Jews of Ashkenazi Germany did not come from the land of Israel and did not reach Eastern Europe from Germany, but became Jews in the Khazar kingdom in the Caucasus. The members of a variety of peoples and races, blonde and black, brown and yellow, became Jews in large numbers. According to academic Mr. Zand, the Zionists need to devise for them a shared ethnicity and historical continuity, produced a long series of inventions and fictions, along with an invocation of racist theses. Some were concocted in the minds of those who conceived the Zionist movement, whilst others were offered as findings of genetic studies conducted in Israel." The title of this article is, exactly as I say, "An Invention Called the Jewish People." So, resistance to the Ashkenazim Jews, who don't have one drop of Semitic blood in their veins, cannot be called anti-Semitism. They're not Semites. In fact, what we can call anti-Semitism is the bulldozing and murder of thousands of Lebanese and Palestinians who are being bombed daily by the Aryan-led Israeli Defense Forces. That's anti-Semitism. And as well as the daily murder of thousands of Iraqis, of Pakistanis, and of Afghanis by the United States Armed Forces. Millions of dead in the case of Iraq since the last 6 years. Now that's anti-Semitism. But no, as it is officially used, anti-Semitism is only criticism of Israel and criticism of the Jews. All criticism of Zionism, anti-Semite. If I criticize Zionism or Israel or any Jew, I'm automatically branded an anti-Semite. However, if a Zionist or an Israeli or a Jew attacks me, there is no word to describe it. Alas, words are missiles that kill minds. Lack of words is like being disarmed. Discrimination. The word discrimination triggers the image of violence, humiliation, and injustice against a minority perpetrated by a majority, an underdog who is being stepped on by the majority. And it has been so in many times throughout history. The black people in the United States were discriminated against by the white majority. Many immigrants to Europe are being discriminated today by the Europeans. The Jews have been discriminated in Russia, in Romania, in Poland, in Germany during parts of the 19th and 20th century. The Aboriginals in all of America, Australia, and Africa are permanently being discriminated against. But what happens when you turn the tables? What happens when a very small but powerful minority discriminates violently against the vast majority through usurped power? For example, Britain in India, a small group of invaders, colonial invaders, who discriminated against hundreds of millions of Indians. The whites in South Africa during apartheid. In my country, between 24th March 1976 and 10th December 1983, about 100,000 civilians and military, usurping the armed forces, the media, and the main strings of power, discriminated against 30 million Argentinians. We had no civil rights, we had no human rights, we had no democracy. Aren't the powerful Zionist organizations, allied with the New World Order overworld, just that? A tiny minority, very well organized, very powerful, discriminating against a vast, larger, but weakened, disoriented, and disorganized majority, whether it be in the United States, in Europe, throughout Latin America, in Argentina. Official Jewish sites say that the total Jewish world population is 16 million people, of which 200,000 live in Argentina. I insist, that's 0.2% of world population, and in my country would be 0.5% of my country's population. Now, I would even add, Zionists are probably half of that, because, as I say, not all Jews are Zionists. Isn't it too much power wielded by too many hands? Are these figures really true? That's another question. Have they been reduced, population figures? And you would say, well, why would anybody want to reduce the official figures of Jewish population? Could it be that the numbers of the Holocaust would not tally? So let's deal with the Holocaust. No one in his or right mind can deny the persecution of European Jews by National Socialist Germany between 1933 and 1945. There is no denying, there is no negating. It happened, it was terrible, it was unjust. The key question that many people ask, I certainly do, is whether Jewish suffering is being exploited for political, economic, and financial purposes, as U.S. academic Norman Finkelstein says in his book, The Holocaust Industry. This would be a betrayal of the memory of the dead under the Nazis, but serves to rally fullest political, economic, financial, military, diplomatic support for the State of Israel, especially in the United States. Billions of US dollars are given to Israel for free so that they can buy the most modern weapons. Diplomatic support is permanently given to Israel at the United Nations. The media are always aligned with the State of Israel. They try to generate popular sympathy so that US foreign policy will always benefit Israel. Atomic bombs have been given to Israel. It's a fact. The only country with weapons of mass destruction in the Middle East is the State of Israel, with 400 atomic bombs given to them by the United States of America. And they've shown with their foreign policy and their behavior that it would be very credible to think that Israel is more than willing to use them. So let me ask you a couple of key questions that I feel need to be openly, fairly, and respectfully debated. First, what was the true extent of murdered Jews between 1933 and 1945 in Europe, and what were the true causes of death? Where did the 6 million figure come from? There is no serious historical investigation that has been come to substantiate this number. This question was recently posed very discreetly by Catholic Bishop Richard Williamson, but he was branded immediately a revisionist, a denier, an anti-Semite. Abuse, insults, discredit, all the noise in the world, but the question is never addressed, because the question that is being asked, why is there no serious historical investigation, that is never addressed. This question was recently posed very discreetly by Catholic Bishop Richard Williamson, but he was branded immediately a revisionist, a denier, an anti-Semite. Abuse, insults, discredit, all the noise in the world, but the question is never addressed, because the question that is being asked, why is there no serious historical investigation, that is never addressed. How powerful are the Zionists that even the Vatican trembles with unholy fear? Second question. If European Jews were persecuted in Europe by Europeans, the Germans, the Austrians and others, why was territorial reparation exacted from Palestinians, who had no role in that persecution? Israel, in actual fact, in 1948, did not win independence. They violently usurped Palestine, driving millions from their homes using terrorist tactics. There were 4 major terrorist organizations at that time: the Lehi, the Haganah, the Stern Group, which was led by former Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, and the Irgun Tzvai Leumi, which was led by former Prime Minister Menachem Begin. They were terrorist organizations, and in 1948, these 4 organizations merged into what is known now as the Israeli Defense Forces, in other words, the armed forces of the State of Israel. Third, if Europeans persecuted European Jews, shouldn't they have to give up part of their territory to the Zionists so that they can set up their homeland there? Why not give them a part of Bavaria or Schleswig-Holstein in Germany so that they can set up their Zionist state? You know, there is still time to right these wrongs. You can create and finance a Zionist state in Europe, resettle all the Israelites there, and give Palestine back to the Palestinians, then you'll see how quickly we will be on the road towards pacification of the Middle East. Fourth question. Why is persecution of Jews put on a class of its own, differentiating it from other genocides and persecutions of the 20th and 21st centuries? As I said at the beginning, over 150 million people were killed in a dark and long list of war and genocide. Russians, Ukrainians, Cambodians, Vietnamese, Chinese, Indians, Koreans, Iraqis, Jews, Germans, Spaniards, South Africans, Hutus, Tutsis, Biafrans, Burmese, Japanese, Chinese, Armenians, Palestinians, Poles, Albanians, Croatians, Chechenians, Colombians, Cubans, Argentinians, Afghanis, Salvadorians, Panamanians, Guatemalans, South Africans, Algerians, Syrians, Egyptians. It's a horribly long list of murdered people. But why only one of these mass murders is given a differentiating, almost religious aura, and even a specific name, a brand name, a trademark? The Holocaust. Setting it aside and giving it a very special, superior category from all others. I ask you, are dead Jews worth more than other dead people? If so, the corollary is obvious. Living Jews are also worth more than other peoples. Living Jews are worth more than Palestinians, than Lebanese, than Iraqis. I hate to say it this way, but at least let's bring it out in the open. What is the rate of exchange that we have to apply here? 1 Jew worth 10 Syrians? Or 1,000 Lebanese? Or 10,000 Palestinians? Or 1 Jew worth 100,000 Iraqis? The insinuation is very clear for all. Are Jews somehow superior to the rest of mankind? Because they are God's chosen people, but which God? A cosmic God chose them? A Christian God chose them? Or is it the bloodthirsty demiurge of the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Judges, and the book of Esther in the Bible? Let's let in a breath of honest, fresh air. Let's bring this out into the open. Let's voice it clearly. At least let Zionists have the honesty of saying it outright. All men are not created equal. Fifth, why is open debate so much feared? Why are people that are asking these questions immediately reviled, attacked, disqualified, insulted, ridiculed, misquoted, mishandled, misjudged? I insist, it is 0.2% of the global population doing this to the other 99.8% of the rest of us. 6. You see, today the Holocaust is touted as a historical fact, but in fact it's a credo, and it must be accepted and believed, exactly as the myth has been concocted. No investigation, no rationalization, no public debate, no discussion. It must be believed. Just like a Christian must believe that Christ was the Son of God, that he resurrected after the crucifixion, and that he was raised to heaven, and that he shall return to judge us all. If you do not accept this dogma, simple, you're not a Christian. Come to think of it, the Holocaust dogma is so powerful that today it's almost on par with the Christian dogma. The Holocaust is a guilt generation machine bent on making us all aware and feeling guilty, even if you were not there, even if you were not a Nazi, even if you were not even born, as I was not born at that time. It's generational guilt falling on the sons and the sons of sons. 8th question. In the so-called West, are we seeing the suffering of one on the cross who died for the sins of mankind being replaced by the suffering of 6 million in the Holocaust who died because of the indifference of humanity? Is the Vatican Church even listening to this? 9th question. How is it that the whole world press aligns behind the Zionist creed, which I insist only represents 0.2% of the world population? Is there so much power in the hands of Zionist leadership that 0.2% can impose its will on the remaining 99.8% of mankind? Isn't this a case of gross and blatant discrimination by a tiny yet immensely powerful minority against the vast majority of peoples in every corner of the world, in almost every country? The history of the Jews is one of suffering and persecution. They have constantly bewailed the curse of anti-Semitism. It's true. Jews have been persecuted, and they have been expelled since time immemorial. Jews were expelled from Babylonia. Jews were expelled from Egypt in ancient times. They were expelled from Palestine by the Romans in the year 70 AD. They were expelled from England in 1289. They were expelled from Spain and Portugal in 1493. They were expelled from France, Germany, Austria, Russia, Poland, Ukraine, Romania. They had been resisted and discriminated over the past century in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Europe, in Latin America, in India, in Argentina even. Why? Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism, says in his book, The Jewish State, wherever Jews go, they carry anti-Semitism with them. So it's really an either-or. Either all peoples of the world, through humanity, through the millennia of time and geographical space, all suffer from a common mental illness or disorder called anti-Semitism, of which the Jews are simply innocent victims, or something in Jewish social behavior, or at least on the part of their elites, elicits growing resistance among host populations that leads to discrimination, resistance, and expulsion. Which will it be? Therefore, we need to openly debate these key questions: Zionism, anti-Semitism, discrimination, and the Holocaust. That is a key factor to understand the New World Order, because it's the rationale behind it. It's a sort of missing link. Without it, the whole irrationality of today's violent world can often hardly be understood. And Jewish communities the world over should be the first to help us by bringing themselves to understanding the terrible things that are being done in their names by their own elites. We ask honest Jewry to consider all of this and to help stop Zionist violence, even as a way of putting themselves out of harm's way. Because suffocating debate will only make the whole thing worse. It will make the Zionist problem go worse, and it will make future reactions even worse. Now, I know that this is a sensitive subject, but I owe it to myself, to my people, and to my fellow men the world over to say it as I have. You cannot understand the complex driving forces behind the New World Order over the past century until today if you ignore one of its most powerful and key factors: Zionism. It's tough, yes. Indeed, the truth hurts.